The following video is not suited for children. So, the demon of my childhood is upon us. The unholy mess of metal, flesh, CGI and Alec Baldwin. Ironic really, for it was once the creation of a holy man for his sick son. Gather around, travellers, for now I shall tell you the tale of my childhood film. Allow me to provide some context. You know Thomas the Tank, we all know Thomas the Tank, the eldritch demon that possesses a steam train and burns down villages in its spare time. It's one of the most popular kids TV shows ever made, going on for over 22 seasons, multiple spin-off movies and merchandise to high hell. And I loved it. It's pretty much the reason I still obsess over trains. I couldn't tell you how many of these things I had. I stopped watching it when it went to CGI in 2009 because 1, I was a big 9-year-old boy who was getting too grown up for Thomas the Tank in the eyes of my school bullies, and 2, the models just worked better, and CGI is shit, and no, I am not an old-fashioned frame-smashing Luddite, shut up, shut up, shut up. The original few TV series were based off of the Railway series written by Reverend Wilbur Awdry, starting in 1945 when he published a short story he told his son while they were sick with the measles. He based all the engines off of real locomotives, based most of the stories off of real events he read in books and magazines, and even used the books to throw shade at British Rail, especially when they were hastily replacing steam power with faulty diesels in the 60s.
Our controller says steam engines spoil our image. Of course we do, snapped Duck. We show what frauds you are.
The series continued until 1972 when Wilbur admitted he had run out of ideas for future stories. His son Christopher took over and he wrote a few more books from 1983 to 2007 with his father's blessing. Of course, the kind Reverend saw his stories be taken to the small screen in 1984, with the series narrated by that one Beatle that played the drums in the UK, and George Carlin narrating it in the US.
Oh yes, I like children.
You know what I say?
Said Edward.
Fuck the children. Fuck them. Fuck kids. They're getting entirely too much attention.
While it was easy to air on British TV, American TV was a whole nother beast altogether. Enter Britt Allcroft, the main producer of the first few seasons of Thomas, as well as some other kids' TV shows. She and Rick Sigelko, I don't know how to pronounce that, insert name on screen here, you can figure it out. They came together to produce a show called Shining Time, where we'd follow some simple shenanigans at a magical train station somewhere in America, with George Carlin playing the character of Mr. Conductor, who would tell the short 5-minute Thomas stories to some kids. Things turned out well, with the show having a positive reception on air. The show stopped after 3 seasons, but it still stuck with Britt when she had plans to make a feature film about Thomas in 1994. In 1996, a chairman at Paramount approached her wanting to make a Thomas film. It wasn't until he started his own film company, Destination Films, in 1998, that work on the film could begin proper, with the main story idea being to mix the models of Thomas with the live action of Shining Time. Unfortunately, the good Reverend passed away in 1997 while the script was still being finalised, so he couldn't give it his blessing. Fortunately for him though, this meant that he wouldn't have to see his life's work bastardised when the demon that was Thomas and the Magic Railroad was released in 2000. The film was panned by critics and audiences alike, only just being able to make back its budget. Ironically for Britt, it was her attempt to blend Shining Time and Thomas together that ruined the film, as British audiences had no clue what Shining Time was and what the hell it was doing in a movie about Thomas, and American audiences were put off by all the time focused on Thomas instead of Shining Time. And that's just the smallest thing wrong with it. So, now I've filled you in on the history, you are ready to witness the spawn of sin. That is, Thomas and the Magic Railroad. Alec Baldwin opens the film and introduces us to Thomas, who apparently lives at one end of his special universe. Thomas is late, and it's at this point I already hate the film because Thomas now has an annoying voice.
Really reliable and right on time.
I at least respect the fact that they're using the low-budget models from the original show, as seen here with a piece broken out of Gordon's cylinder block instead of, using any of the $19 million you had to literally fix that. Out of nowhere, Diesel 10 shows up, a character never mentioned in any of the books or in any of the TV episodes. Thomas quickly fills us in with some very natural exposition.
10 out of 10 for devious deeds and brutal strength. The blast from the past, who hates steam engines.
And now we transition to the real world, where Alec Baldwin takes us to the other end of his universe, to Shining Time, where he starts singing?
there appears a sign.
Fuck, here too? First Tom and Jerry singing, now it's gotten into Thomas? Oh, whatever. So this is Shining Time, a lawless, backwards hellhole where everyone must atone for their sins in some weird, contrived punishment. Such as this child who must forever carry this goldfish with him, or this guy who's forever playing the violin, or this man who must perpetually juggle. What crimes against humanity did they commit? What mortal sins brought them to this punishment? Back to Thomas for some reason, and he's chatting with James about buffers or something, and we get this wonderful one-liner.
I'm feeling a little blue, which isn't so hot when you're red.
Just as everyone is getting their breath back from that joke, Diesel 10 rocks up and is really fucking evil for a Thomas character.
Now, I've come back to find a lost steam engine.
What?
I'm gonna destroy her and dominate you, and then you'll be nothing but useless scrap.
Like, the Diesels in the books were just arseholes because they believed they were better because they were modern and new, but this is just bloody cartoonish. A fun fact about Diesel 10 and the voice acting in general: he was originally voiced by Keith Scott, but was deemed too scary for younger audiences during test screenings.
Splunch! Get up here and destroy!
James and my homeboy Percy were going to be voiced by Michael Angeles, the UK narrator after Ringo left, but replaced when his voice was deemed too old for the characters, and Thomas was going to be voiced by John Bellis.
Run, lady, quickly! And I'm going to help you!
But you want to know the best part? Both Bob Hoskins and Ewan McGregor auditioned for the role of Thomas. Ewan McGregor as Thomas the Tank.
It's over, Anakin! I have the high ground!
Ah, ain't that magical? They recorded that boy's first time waving at someone. Keep practicing, champ, you'll get the hang of it. Now we're in Shining Time again, where a boy delivers exposition by talking to his dog. Yep. Kid mentions helping clean out the yard of some guy named Burnett Stone, and then he jumps on his horse. Things just get crazier and crazier around here, huh? The station's just as weird. It's a weird, loud, strange place. A crazy, noisy, bizarre town, if you will. Up in Muff Mountain, we meet Burnett Stone, who is currently in his workshop cave when Horseboy from earlier wanders in. Burnett explains that he's in charge of looking after Lady and repairing her after she crashed or being chased by Diesel 10. And he's a miserable sod because he's unable to make her steam. And just to make sure you know that Diesel 10 wants to scrap all the steam trains, it cuts back to Sodor where he explains just that to his two hench Diesels. Get used to this, the film jumps from place to place like Tigger after he's gone into Alec Baldwin's secret powder stash. Speaking of, Mr. Conductor arrives and informs everyone he's going to Sodor while the Fat Controller is on holiday. And apparently the dog that Boy was talking to earlier realises that bad shit's about to happen, like the rest of this movie for example, and tries to stop him from leaving. Alec, in all his wisdom, ignores the dog and travels to Sodor anyway, apparently having problems with his gold dust. Not the first time he's had problems with magic dust, huh? Also, Peter Fonda is just in his workshop wondering what he's doing with his life, both in and out of character. And now we're in the big city where Matilda, playing Fonda's granddaughter, is going to the train station so she can go stay with him for a few weeks. This guy in the background's all like, oh god, they're shooting a Thomas movie, you gotta walk past, act natural, don't look at them, keep walking, don't look at them no matter what. Matilda and her mum hug and part ways, with Matilda having the bright idea to just climb this random ladder to get to the train station. Oh yeah, she's gonna fit in perfect with all the other weirdos in Shining Time. What was Brit thinking when she directed this? Does she consider this normal human behaviour? Maybe a decade of producing a show about talking trains really breaks down your understanding of human social skills. Anyway, in Thomas World, all the big engines are being mean to Thomas because he's a small tank engine and they're bigger than him. Because they did that in the books a few times, I guess. We get some exposition from Henry basically going over the fact there's a lost steam engine that's super magical or whatever. I've also just noticed that all 7 of the original Thomas engines are in this, apart from Edward. Apparently there was nowhere in the script to fit him, so Britt Allcroft just left him out. To which I say, that's horseshit. They didn't even use him as a background character. Edward was the first one to appear in the books, and now they treat him like that? I say justice for Edward. Bring Edward back. Bring Edward back. Bring Edward back. Alec Baldwin, in the meanwhile, has arrived to serve his punishment for his sins. to live as a poorly green-screened-in conductor on the set of Thomas the Tank. He gets a call from Sir Topham Hatt basically telling him to not fuck up, and there are a few visual gags here that are alright. Though if that's what Lady Hatt looks like, are all of the other people in the world models from the show? Is Alec Baldwin like an alien to them? So now we cut to bedtime, and for some reason Alec is sleeping with the engines instead of in, I don't know, a B&B. And clearly all that gold dust is doing something to the poor bastard because he's talking to a bat and a ball. And then out of nowhere, Diesel 10 shows up and starts messing with some innocent scaffolding. I mean, he's not much of a threat, he's on rails and his arm isn't long enough to reach anybody, so I'm not sure what his plan was there. Train pinching grabber claws can't break steel beams. But then, after realising he's out of gold dust, Mr. Conductor threatens to put some sugar in his tank and speaks with his lips out of sync. The visuals of Alec Baldwin holding sugar and talking out of sync is enough to horrify Diesel, and so he buggers off, leaving the engines to sleep peacefully. Later that night, Mr. Conductor has a nightmare that the rapture happened back in Sin City, leaving only the receptionist behind. It is in this moment he realises that he needs to find more gold dust, or else that might happen. Maybe. Like I said, it was a dream. Back in the real world, Matilda is trying to figure out which train she needs to get when the dog from Sinning Time shows up and leads her onto the wrong train. Okay, you just got on a train because a random dog kind of showed you where to get on it. For fuck's sake, Matilda, you're supposed to be smarter than this. And now we have to hear another bloody song. Well, here's how you make this song tolerable. Take a shot whenever you hear the word feel. Meanwhile, Peter Fonda opens the cover of a book because he's probably not being paid enough to open it to a page that might have more than 15 words on it. And now Alec Baldwin begins his journey to find a windmill because apparently there's a clue there that might help him find gold dust. And he also has to walk there because he's got no gold dust left to teleport him, and he didn't consider catching a train on this island that is literally full of fucking trains. Hashtag justice for Edward. And here is where you begin to watch Mr. Conductor slowly lose his mind. Because, and I'm giving you the full truth here, a rabbit leaves some vegetables that supposedly help you think. Not only that, but he also starts talking to the camera as well, in what I can only assume is a desperate call to help to the audience watching. And then he calls his cousin via flower. I'm just going to give you a moment to unpack all that. And now we're throwing this cousin guy into the mix, because just throwing in characters left and right, why not? He's played by Michael E. Rogers, and in all honesty, he's the only enjoyable human character in this whole thing. Matilda gets off at Sinning Tome and bumps into crazy Scottish cousin guy. They exchange pleasantries and the cousin goes off to find Alec Baldwin's emergency supply of gold dust. Alec man, listen, you kicked the gold dust when you were 27, you don't need that emergency supply. Eventually the receptionist realises that Matilda is actually old Mr. Grumpy's granddaughter and takes her back to him. There's also some other stuff that happens here, but it's really not that important, it's just a train whistling. Back on the island of Hodor, the engines figure out there must be some sort of magic railway Mr. Conductor uses to travel from the real world into theirs with his gold dust. Unfortunately, Diesel overhears and plans to find it first. Fortunately, Toby follows him, rings his bell, and Diesel overreacts, causing him to knock the roof of his shed in. This then segues us into another song. And this time, you bet your gold dust little me knew the words to this song after watching the VHS tape over 100 times. This is the best song ever put into any children's film. Move over, Mary Poppins, get lost, chitty chitty bang bang, this is music. Here's the one, here's the number one, Thomas the Tank Engine. So Thomas goes off to collect some island of Sodor coal for Henry. If you read the books, it was actually Welsh coal Henry needed, but just like Wales, nobody really cares about it. While contemplating about how much he hates the Welsh, Thomas accidentally bumps a truck through some magical buffers without realising and sets off on his way. Eventually, him and his homeboy Percy realise that's where the magic railway is, and Thomas sets off to find Alec Baldwin, who is now wandering aimlessly, trying hard to find the windmill. Why he didn't just get a train there in the first place, I don't know. Hell, James offhandedly mentions earlier that he went past the windmill and Mr. Conductor wasn't there. I guess all that gold dust really scrambles the brain. Then, out of nowhere, Diesel 10 rocks up and chases Mr. Conductor away from the green screen behind him. Alec tries to escape, but is grabbed by the big claw and is held over the edge of a crumbling bridge as Diesel 10 demands to know where the magic buffers are. Fortunately, he has a pair of scissors on hand and, after a quick struggle, cuts one of the hydraulic pipes of the claw, sending him flying all the way to the windmill.
Did you put all this here for me?
Oh god, he's breaking the fourth wall. Somebody quick, rebuild it. And then he starts hallucinating words on the wall. I think all the pressure's starting to get to him. He's beginning to crack. Now he's out of gold dust, he's really gonna go off the rails. And now we cut back to real life, which is just as jarring as the first time we jumped from model trains to live action. Matilda and Boy are hanging out and exchange some clunky dialogue before Boy offers to take Matilda down to the local town of Salem for a bit on his horse. Just, what kid rides a horse? Get a bike. While in the station, Matilda bumps into the cousin guy again, who offers to take her to Sodor. Being the type of child to follow a dog onto a train, she obviously says yes, and the two head on over to poorly green screen themselves into Sodor. They bump into Thomas, who picks them up, and they all end up meeting Mr. Conductor at the windmill. The two begin to discuss their gold dust problem when cousin gets bored, and, in what I can only assume is a moment of severe ADHD, just grabs onto one of the sails on the windmill. Of course, the wind picks up, he spins round, he gets flung off, and green screens his way through the air, landing on Diesel 10's cab and starts to surf him. We also get a real quick cut of Boy telling Peter Fonda that Matilda is missing, and instead of looking worried or acting in any way, Peter just sort of looks like he doesn't want to be there. Though in all fairness, they were filming in the Isle of Man, which is dangerously close to England and the effects of self-loathing it radiates. Back to the island, homeboy Percy has found the magic buffers, and unfortunately so has Diesel 10's two helpers. After being spooked, Percy sets off to go and tell Thomas. In the meanwhile, Mr. Conductor keeps Matilda entertained, and the two talk about the lost engine that's supposed to help them travel to the Magic Railroad. Conductor thinks the engine is gone when Matilda mentions she heard a train whistle coming from Muff Mountain, where the engine is in the cave workshop. This cheers Alec up a bit as he realises it's part of the cryptic clue that he hallucinated earlier. Meanwhile, Peter explains to Boy that he needs to figure out how to get the engine running again, or else the Magic Railroad will disappear and Matilda will be trapped in the Thomas world along with Alec Baldwin and crazy Scottish cousin. Mr. Conductor then figures that Thomas could just go through the buffers and take Matilda back instead. Thomas reluctantly agrees and takes Matilda to the buffers. As they approach, this tumbleweed comes out of nowhere and starts talking to them for about 10 seconds before jumping out of the way. Thomas goes through the buffers and enters the Magic Railway. Now I'm going to say that again. A tumbleweed comes out of nowhere and starts talking to them for about 10 seconds before jumping out of the way as Thomas goes through the buffers and enters a magical railway. If any viewers in the UK are watching from Stroud and Gloucester and can hear a noise coming from their local graveyard, that is Reverend Audrey's ashes stirring angrily in their grave. So Thomas, now looking noticeably more CG, heads down the railway and notices the coal truck he knocked there earlier. He decides to pick it up and takes it with him down the railway. Eventually comes to the end of the line and ends up on top of a cliff. Matilda jumps out to go find her granddad, leaving Thomas to wonder what he had done to end up in such a bullshit situation. Fortunately, Matilda bumps into Boy, who's out on his horse, who agrees to take her back to Grandpa Peter. Unfortunately, Thomas and his shit CG start to roll down the hill and end up magicking the fuck out of there. Still, the CG looks better than it does in the show currently. Yes, I am still bitter about that, the models just look better, #Justice for Edward. Eventually, Matilda makes it back to Grandpa Peter, who is clearly relieved and cares very much that she's safe. Meanwhile, Britt Allcroft is just sat watching the director's monitor like, yes, such raw emotion. Matilda asks him to use the engine to go help Mr. Conductor and the Scottish one with ADHD, but Peter explains that he can't make the engine steam and no other coal he's tried works. Then Matilda suggests they try some of the Island of Sodor brand coal that Thomas brought with them, to which Peter, overcome with excitement, agrees. Back on Sodor, Conductor Cousin is still surfing Diesel 10 when they hit a dead end and bump into James. Before Diesel 10 can get either of them, Cousin uses the last of his and Alec's gold dust to GTFO and magic their way back to Mr. Conductor. Eventually, they both realise they're living on a prayer and just hope they can find more gold dust soon before Alec has another episode and tries to break the fourth wall again. Meanwhile, Peter starts to stoke up the engine's fire and is actually displaying another emotion besides sheer boredom. An emotion I can only describe as, I'm smiling because I've finally snapped. They set off and head down the Magic Railroad, admiring the view as the railroad gets its magic energy back. Also, the second-hand embarrassment I feel for Peter Fonda as he delivers this line actually hurts.
Well, my lady, the lights are all green for you now. Green for glory.
Oh hey look, the engine has a face now, that's cool. Oh hey look, there's Thomas, that's cool too I guess. Yay, they made it back to Sodor. Much to the joy of Alec Baldwin. Their celebration is brought down however, as he remembers they still don't know how to get more gold dust. Before we have time to get depressed, Diesel 10 rocks up and tries to scrap Lady. Peter reminds us of how much of a gentleman he is.
So am I, m'lady.
And drives Lady away, followed closely by Thomas and Diesel 10. As they speed off, Alec realises that Lady is one of the key things needed to find more gold dust, and promptly begins to panic. So the chase is on. Both Thomas and Lady speed down the line trying to escape from the claw of Diesel 10. With some encouragement from Peter Fonda, they rush through tunnels and over bridges, with Diesel 10 making puns to lighten the life or death mood.
I like my lunch steamed!
They eventually come to the crumbling viaduct, with Thomas and Lady just managing to make it over in time before it gives way. Diesel tries to race over, but the track gives way, leaving him to grab onto a piece of track before plummeting down into a convenient barge passing below him. Later, while everyone is recovering from whatever the hell just happened, Mr. Conductor finally figures out what he needs to make more gold dust and get his fix. They mix some magic shavings from Lady with some water from a convenient well, and bada bing, bada boom, they have gold dust. Meanwhile, Peter Fonda just looks like he really wants to get this over with. Alec Baldwin finally gets his fix, Matilda and Grumpy Peter have a generic special moment, Thomas goes home, and everyone lives happily ever after. So that was Thomas and the Magic Railroad. It wasn't that bad now, was it? No, it was a fucking train wreck. This film ruined both the shows and the books for so many people. The plot had more threads than a poorly knitted jumper and they're all just as hard to follow. The effects are subpar even for the 2000s, the stakes just don't feel present or weighty, and the acting is just utter crap. Like, some people involved are great actors, but the lines they deliver are just clunky and some look like they don't even want to be there. The only person that seemed to be having any fun at all was Michael E. Rogers. You can tell Britt Allcroft had little to no previous directing experience when she went into making this. The fact that she voices Lady in this makes me believe that this whole thing is literally just an origin story for her trained Sona. Goodest Boy award can go to Percy. Not for any outstanding particular reason, but mostly because he's the only character that's not really done anything to offend me throughout this whole thing, so yay, good on you Percy, you can have that one. So why is this film so bad? Well, aside from everything previously mentioned, the film suffered a lot behind the scenes as well, with scenes cut, reshot, and entire characters cut. Like I said earlier, during test screenings, Diesel 10 was deemed too scary for kids, and Britt had to write in some lines and scenes to make him less scary. Alongside that, she had to cut out a character altogether for being too scary called P.T. Boomer. The idea was he wanted to find and destroy Lady himself because he didn't believe in magic. There are key moments that had to be changed, such as him blowing up the cliff Thomas was on, causing him to roll down the hill, Boomer riding on top of Diesel 10 during the chase scene, and just some moments where he confronts Peter Fonda's character. There's a shot of him in the final cut of the film, just dubbed over as a guy asking for directions. There's also leaked footage of the chase scene on YouTube starring Boomer as well. In 2007, Britt Allcroft revealed that the final film was a mess because of all the changes that had to be made so quickly before the film's release. As such, some fans have started a campaign to try and get the original test screening version released, as it made much more sense than whatever the hell mess we got in the final product. The film's troubles unfortunately didn't quite end there either. Because the film was such a flop, only just being able to make its money back, and being a permanent shit stain on the work of a holy man, Destination Films took a nosedive and Britt ended up having the rights to Thomas bought off of her by Hit Entertainment. Hit then went on to make another 13 seasons and capitalise on the toys and merchandising rights of the show, which is why the little blue bastard's face is everywhere now, #Justice for Edward. And so, that is how what was once a simple bedtime story told by a holy man fell and became the soulless CGI shell we see today, used as nothing but an excuse to sell model train sets. And now you know the burden of the knowledge I carry, traveller. Use this information how you see fit. As for me, I shall continue to wander these lands, sharing my knowledge with other travellers such as yourself. For now you best be going. Remember, like and share the video, and also do the subscribe thing. Now, roll the outro.